my feeling is that in general people really want, that is just people, really want to understand how that can be. What is it that goes on in the brain when someone can't learn, or if they can't remember anything anymore? And why is it that if the two hemispheres are separated, as in a split brain surgery, that one hemisphere can know things that the other one can't? And so I think it does have an impact on how we think we really ourselves make decisions. Is it really all present to me, and I'm fully conscious of all of the things that go into a decision, and then I perform it? That's sort of the model that philosophers have peddled for a long time, but we know it isn't so. So we kind of have to rethink what it is to make decisions and to form judgments.
So what's your version of the whole panoply here? The construction of a self? What is a self? What is consciousness? These are subjects that you used to talk to Francis Crick about. You've written about consciousness. What's your take on this?
The problem of consciousness, I think, is a little bit like the problem of life. And that is that it isn't going to be answered with a single experiment or set of experiments, and it isn't going to be answered by looking for correlations between this and that. I think it's going to require that we understand the nature of declarative memory and how it's different from skilled learning. It's going to require we understand the various attentional systems, the top-down one that we can, as it were, consciously control, and the bottom-up one that makes us turn our heads to a flash or a sound. We're going to need to understand more about the emotions and the role that they have, and all of these funny things that play a role in consciousness, like feeling dizzy, feeling well, feeling fatigued. These are extremely important signals for the well-being of the body, and they're part of what has to be integrated in order for people or for animals with brains to make good judgments about what to do.
I mean, do you have any?
I don't think we know.
Yeah, but you don't make any sort of little cut-offs here and say, well, humans are conscious, other creatures aren't, or
oh no,
or you need language to be conscious, as Dan would not.
I don't think so. I mean, bear in mind that we differ from mice in only 300 genes. That Paul is more similar genetically to a male chimpanzee than he is to me. There's not a lot of room,
I would say
genetically.
So, yes.
There's not a lot of room for something that's wholly and completely new. And besides, what we see in many animals is the kind of flexibility in action and behavior that's very similar to the kind of flexibility in human planning and organization that seems to need awareness.
Okay.
There's a point that one's making at this juncture. Upon hearing of how we might come to understand how brain pathology can produce social pathology, upon hearing that we may come to understand how consciousness is produced by God knows what mechanisms in the brain, a common reaction is to say, this is frightening, this is reductionistic, this is making us small, it's cold and it's frightening and it's dehumanizing. And I appreciate those feelings, and I want to suggest that exactly the opposite is true. And here are the reasons why. As we come to understand more deeply and slowly gain control over the various kinds of pathology of character or intellect or memory, we will be able to take better care of our children and our brothers and our sisters and our loved ones. As a result of coming to understand how a person's consciousness and the person's personality, the profile of cognitive and social virtues they display, as a result of coming to understand understand how those things develop in the course of a lifetime, we'll be in a much better position to ward off predations. We can save people from disasters that might otherwise befall them. We will see more deeply into the reality that is another person, and therefore we will be able to take better care of it. I can sum this up by saying, what you understand better, you can have better control over. That which you control allows you to intervene and to modulate. It takes you from a situation where you have no freedom at all because you're simply a hostage to a fate you don't understand, to a situation where you actually have some freedom. You have some foresight. You can see what's going on. I think this will lead to greater humanization of the individual humans. I think it will allow us to be more kind, more insightful, more caring about other people, and much more effective in bringing about. I don't fear it at all. On the whole, knowledge is power, and power can always be abused, for sure. But power that can reduce misery and make us see more deeply into each other's souls is knowledge we should seek.
Well, that's a good enlightenment perspective, but there's still, as you well know, playing devil's advocate for a moment,
sure,
lots of people out there who think that the work of science basically is dehumanizing in a curious sense, and that they find more, it's taking away the meaning from life, and that somehow there's more solace in religion, other belief systems, other ways of knowing.
That's a fair point, and it deserves addressing. What can I say on short notice? Something like the following. Let's go back 100,000 years to when humans were hunter-gatherers or scrabbling their way through the forest, lifting up rocks, hoping to find some grubs for dinner, and think of the level of meaning that their life had. It certainly wasn't zero. They loved one another, they defended one another, they did all sorts of wonderful things, but I don't think that their life is more meaningful than is the life of anybody in this room because they were ignorant of science. I think science has broadened our horizons in 100 different dimensions, and life now has more meaning, more potential for humans than it has ever had before. I think the reaction you describe is a very short-sighted reaction, and it's just the normal reaction of being told that you're going to have to learn something new. Nobody wants to learn something new, at least if they're past 50 and they're suspicious of the would-be teacher.
We've talked about this before, different ways of knowing. If you're going to whisk away the carpet, don't you have to put something else in its place first, some sort of...
No, I don't know about what the carpet is that's being whisked away. I mean, I think there is, of course, a tendency for people to imagine that religion provides something like meaningfulness in life. But often, when you talk to people who have a religious belief, it isn't really very much different from the kind of belief that I have. It's just a sort of general sense of kind of hopefulness, a sense that, things might be better for the offspring than they are for the parents, a general sense that somehow the problems that we as a group confront, that they can be solved. And those are things that I share as well. But of course, it's another very different issue to try to have a sort of institution of ignorance, which really tries to prevent science from moving forward and tries to prevent science from making discoveries that can help. And there, I think, the fact of it is that there are people, and Leon Cass on the President's Bioethics Council is one of them, who opposes the very idea of the Enlightenment. thinks that the period of the Enlightenment was one of the great tragedies of human history, and that we really would have been better off living in what you and I would call the Dark Ages, but in what he would think of as an age where people had the comfort of knowing that they would go to hell if they didn't do what the priest said, and so on and so forth. And I don't know how you talk somebody out of that,
well,
really.
You probably must have tried, because you actually